Hey, welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we're going to go through some more code review lab and take a look at a challenge called Survey Secrets. So, the description reads, review the authentication code for Insight Loop, an online survey and research platform used by Fortune 500 companies to gather confidential market research data. After a recent database breach, attackers are able to quickly compromise respondent accounts and access private survey responses containing unpublished business strategies and competitive intelligence. Investigate how user credentials are being stored and processed. So, this is an application built using Ruby, and we're looking for a misconfiguration or vulnerability with how user credentials are being stored. So if you're not familiar with this video content, what we're going to go ahead and do is read through some Ruby code and try to identify one vulnerable line of code to help solve this lab. So if you have a Code Review Lab subscription and want to follow along, feel free to sign in and we could do the lab together. If not, and you just want to hang around for the educational content, I hope that you find some value in this video, and if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And if this is the kind of content you like to see, feel free to subscribe and we'll go through several Code Review Lab challenges. We'll do some exploit code development and a lot of fun web and mobile application pen testing stuff. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so let's get started. Let's begin with app.rb. Here's the entry point for the Ruby application, and at the top we are requiring Sinatra slash JSON, require relative config slash database, which I see it's located right here, and then require routes, survey routes, and auth routes, which are located right over here, and then middleware slash session handler, which I don't see located over here, so I guess we don't have to effectively worry about that. We're creating a class Insight Loop app, and then in here it looks like we're basically doing some session creation right here, register survey routes, and then auth routes, which will be relative to what's going on over here. And we do have one route set up in here, so a get to /health to check on the status of the application to make sure it's running, so a user can come by, check /health to make sure the application is up and running. And then located in database.rb, we have require SQL, require YAML, and we have two variables in here, env and config, which is storing some basic values in here. We have a YAML load file config slash database.yaml, which again, I do not see that over here, so I guess we don't have to worry about that, but we can pretty much take a guess what's going on here is that config is being used here to set up a connection to the database for users to make various different calls using the application to relay information to the database, to create content, update content, delete, read, etc. And then put database connection. So nothing crazy in here, no issues that I can currently see. So let's continue to read through this. So respondent auth service.rb. So requiring digest, requiring relative, models respondent, and then let's see, so the respondent auth service, so we do know that we are looking for how user credentials are being stored and processed. So this is rather concerning. So MD5 hex digest plain password. So this looks like a issue to me because MD5 is a relatively old and deprecated hashing algorithm that has several vulnerabilities and issues such as like collision attacks and things like that, etc. Just that seems like potentially where I'm leaning towards so far after reading the code where this issue lies, but let's continue reading on. So that is definitely, so the hash password digest. So okay, then we have a def self authenticate email and password. So the email and password are being passed to this function in here. Respondent variable is the respondent.find by email, email downcase.strip, so whatever we passed into the email here. Return nil unless respondent, and then hash underscore input equals the hash password. I like this. I just noticed the comment, hash passwords for secure storage. Anyway, so hash input, hash password right here. Return nil unless respondent.pass hashword equals hashed input. And then a self-create respondent param, so pass in these params, hash password, respondent.create, email, password, full name. So we are apparently creating and storing passwords using MD5. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that, but read through the rest of the files just to get a general idea of what's going on. Let's see if anything else pops up so we're not jumping the gun. So the respondent class, and let's see, validate. So validate underscore presence, the email and the password hash, and then some regular expressions in here to validate. It looks like the email in here. This looks like a regular expression to validate email, and then self find by email. So we'll pass in the email, find the first in here. Ruby is a very fascinating language to me just by how the syntax is structured. Sometimes I think it's very beautiful and elegant, and a lot of times it could be a little jarring. Not a knock on it at all, just something a little bit different. Let's see. To save hash ID, pass an ID, email, full name, full name. So nothing in here. This is also located in the model to relay information to the database. In typical like MVC style frameworks, models are used to be kind of like the communication guard to databases to do your CRUD-based applications. And then the routes files, auth route and survey routes, this is where users can point to, looks like various API calls. So app.post, so we'll make a post to API slash auth slash login to authenticate into the application, and we'll pass in the data, which is going to be parsed as JSON request.body, and then we're going to take whatever is passed as JSON into this data and review the email and the password. And we want to check if the respondent is true, so there was a success with that. If so, we're going to create a session in here matching the respondent.id, JSON success true respondent, hash to save hash. Else, we get a 401 invalid credentials. And then there's another route in here for a post API auth register do. So this looks like it's actually creating the registration. So JSON parse request body.read respondent auth service, create the respondent, and then store that respondent ID into a session and then return success. And finally, the last file is survey underscore routes.rb. And this looks like it's doing there's a model survey routes and then self.register app before, so API slash survey surveys all of these. And this looks like this wants to check to make sure we have a session ID, which was established over here. And then I believe another section of the application, but it's effectively just checking to make sure we are authenticated. If not, you're going to return a 401 and then relay a message authentication required. And this goes towards, looks like API slash surveys for all the endpoints. And then API surveys responses. Responses equals survey responses where the respondent ID matches the session ID, JSON response that map to hash map, and then a respondent here. So I think this was pretty clear cut in my opinion on where the vulnerable line of code is. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the digest MD5 hex digest and see if this is the vulnerable line of code. So let's go ahead and submit this and waiting and solved. Wonderful. So let's talk about understanding the vulnerability. So the application uses digest MD5 to hash respondent passwords before storing them into the database. MD5 is a cryptographically broken hashing algorithm that should never be used for storing passwords. It has several critical weaknesses, so speed, no salt, and then collision vulnerabilities, which is something I believe I mentioned earlier. So you can read up a little bit more about these if you wish. When the database was breached, attackers could crack the MD5 hashes within hours using readily available tools and rainbow tables. So utilizing things like John the Ripper or Hashcat, and then various password lists, potentially something like RockU, something like that, etc. And it also mentioned like rainbow tables. So this gave them access to respondent accounts containing sensitive market research data, unpublished business strategies, and confidential survey responses from major corporations. So I thought that was a pretty straightforward and enjoyable challenge. If this is your first time at the channel and this is your first time seeing Code Review Lab, I highly recommend looking more into this application and this service. So you effectively have a means of going through several challenges from easy, medium, hard, and we can kind of play around with various different programming languages, Python, Java, Go, PHP, etc., and discover a wide variety of different vulnerabilities to read through. So let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, concerns. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to leave a comment letting me know that you enjoyed it, and feel free to subscribe. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Happy hacking, take care, and we'll see you around.